This is the last part of this series that we're doing, this 5-part response to a public review of the work that we were doing by Dr. Laura Robinson. She posted it on her substack. And she titled it A Friendly Critique, a Friendly Review, or something like that. In fact, I'll quote it directly. She titled it, the BEMA Podcast, A Friendly Critical Review. And that's exactly what it was. And I took some time in the last video to try to slow down and settle myself down and make sure that I really want to maintain that tone. I've titled this whole series A Grateful Response to a Friendly Critique, because I do feel like her response was made in good faith. It was friendly. It was generous. She could have been far more critical than she was. It was a friendly review, and I'm grateful for it. A, because I really agree with a lot of what she's saying, and B, it makes me better, even though I disagree with, I land in a different place than she lands. We are on the same team, and we really are working with a lot of the same pieces. We just put the pieces together a little bit differently. And I'll say what I said at the very beginning of this series. That does not mean that she is my academic superior by leaps and bounds. I am not saying that we are peers at all. And I've wanted to even slow down throughout the series because I didn't want this response to be defensive. I simply wanted to respond in a same friendly way and try to explain for some of our listeners, and also get our listeners to think critically about, where do you land? This is not stuff we're trying to hide. It's not stuff we're trying to run from. It's stuff we want to engage. The academic process is one of engagement, one of peer review. And I don't want to insinuate at all that I could talk down to Dr. Laura Robinson or even across the table to Dr. Laura. She has a bunch of beautiful things to say. And like I've pointed out throughout the series, she sits in a scholastic academic camp where there's lots of company. Lots of people will land where she lands. She doesn't have some fringe opinion. She's not crazy about the way she's looking at history. Lots of scholars and lots of historians would agree with the points that she makes and would have the same kind of critical review. We are coming from a separate camp. We are coming from what you might, if you got a chance to listen to the episode that's been in the description of the videos, then you've heard us talk about the marginal versus mainstream. We are coming from the mainstream camp. We believe Jesus was a mainstream Jew, partaking in a mainstream Jewish experience. We believe that because of what we see in church history. We believe that because of what the Talmud tells us Second Temple Judaism was like. And that's a camp. The other camp is probably the majority camp. And it is the camp of marginal Jewish scholarship. They think Jesus was a marginal Jew. He was a Jew, but he was very different. He was setting up something new. He was doing something new. And so you can't assume Jewish attributes about Jesus. So anyway, that is part of what we wanted to point out. She is far from wrong, far from crazy, far from not understanding history. Lots of people would agree with where she's coming from, but not everybody. And there is another group of people that assess the source material differently, and they land in a different place. And I just wanted to give voice to that, because I think when I read her post, it's possible, I don't even think she's saying this, but it's possible that some people could walk away and go, oh, all that stuff was just wrong. That's just all that stuff the BEMA Podcast says is just wrong. Well, it's not quite that clean, and it's not quite that easy. There are some people that do put the pieces together that way, and that happens to be the schools of scholarship that have taught me and that I agree with when I've looked at the same material myself. All right. I want to deal with the conclusion to her post in this video, and I think it sets us up really nicely to make some points. When I wrote my comment in the comments below, I said, I love your conclusion. I agree with everything you say here. So let's walk through it. She says, the problems I've seen in That the World May Know, that's Ray Vanderlaan's ministry, and the BEMA Podcast, are problems that seem to be common to a lot of popular history. I don't want to come out swinging and say you shouldn't listen to this show. I don't think that's true. But I am going to suggest that if you're going to make a historical claim in a sermon or on your own writing based on something you learned from these pieces of media, that you should check it out for yourself, in italics. Look to see if you can find an academic or primary source that backs up the claim. Dr. Laura Robinson could not agree with you more. We have said this always from day one, all throughout our podcast journey. You cannot quote us as your source. You should not be quoting us as your source. That's not us. We're not the scholars. We long to point you towards the scholars. BEMA Podcast, I will allow ourselves to be labeled as pop history. That's the right category. I said that in the first video. Maybe it kind of stings a little, but it's the right category. It's the right category. Ray Vanderlaan, pop history, I'm going to take some issues with. We got some degrees there. He was trained by some of the best in the world in the mainstream Jewish scholarship camp. I don't think that the world may know qualifies as pop history. BEMA Podcast? Sure. For sure, when you're learning anything from us, you need to go find it in the source material. But my whole point in saying that is because there is source material. We'll get to that here in a second. Here we go. Studying history is, in my biased opinion, one of the best things you can do with your time. The people behind the BEMA Podcast deserve no criticism whatsoever for seeking to learn and teach history. And I mean this, thank you. Thank you for that saying that. I am concerned that their back catalog reflects the use of unreliable sources. I'm not saying you should not listen to the show. I'm not saying you should have any ill will towards them, but the claim deserves some fact checking. And if you're going to use it as a source for your work, you should do the checking first. Totally agree. Totally agree. I'm not sure I agree that we have unreliable sources. I'm not going to agree with that assessment. Sometimes my sources are dated because that's the sources I learned from years ago. And I'm not in regular academia. I'm not a scholar like Dr. Laura Robinson. I don't spend every day in the newest material that's coming out. But I can tell you that the mainstream Jewish scholarship camp is alive and well, that there's lots of new things coming out, that it's not a backdated, old, nobody does that anymore. It's not the majority perspective, but there's a reason for that, and there's a reason why. So there's that. I am not going to evaluate sources the same way that she will. Because she's probably more of a minimalist and I'm a maximalist, I will give more credence to sources that she would give less credence to. That's true. That's true. She may call those unreliable. And I disagree. I call them reliable. I call Eusebius a reliable historical source. Not one you can accept without critical thought. You have to be critical of any and every source. But I consider something like Eusebius reliable history. And a lot of scholars in her camp do not consider that. I do. I think the rejection of that is wrong. We just have a disagreement there. It's not that we're so caught up in pop history that we don't know what we're doing. It's that I was taught by teachers who evaluate those resources differently. If I could give some unsolicited but well-intended advice to the BEMA Podcast staff in the event that they are listening, hey, we are listening. You can give unsolicited advice. Thank you. And I don't mind it, really. Number one, every episode would really benefit from having a works cited and show notes. This would make it easy for people to look up references and look up competing interpretations. Listen, if you've been with the BEMA Podcast at all, you know how devoted we are to doing that. You know how we use show notes. I have a hard time believing that the 10 episodes she chose to listen to just didn't have any show notes. But it's possible. We don't have show notes for every single episode, and we probably don't cite as much as she would like us to, but we cite a lot of resources. A lot. Whenever we get the opportunity to, we cite them. In fact, if you go, I'll put this link in the description of the video, but if you go to bemadiscipleship.com/resources, you can find a webpage that has every resource we've cited or linked in our entire journey. And I believe if you go there, you're going to find almost 500 citations. So we cite a lot of things. We cite a lot of stuff. And it may be unfortunate that she just didn't pick the right episodes to encounter that. We cite a lot of stuff. So on point number 1, we agree with you, and I think we do it. And I think we do it more than you may have realized. We do a lot. And you can click on that link. I put that in the comment to her post and everything else. Number 2, explain why you're using the source you're using in the text of the show itself. If you think that there are interesting things in the Talmud that sound like Matthew, that's fine. Comparison between historical texts is a totally valid practice. It's completely valid to explain how rabbis thought about the Star of Judah and use this as a comparison point for Matthew, just to be circumspect about suggesting Matthew would have agreed or known a later tradition. Agree? I think that's what we do. I'm not sure we're not doing that. I think, and this goes back to our last video, I think perhaps we may have been bringing some assumptions into that series. I don't know if you listened to one episode of that series, if you listened to the whole series. Again, we started that series with a whole episode agreeing with so much of what she's saying. Our language doesn't presume what she mentions, but if she was afraid that we were, it's not like we always make it clear. We take some of those things for granted because of our audience and because of all the work that we've done. So maybe that one seems a little confusing to me because I just completely agree. And I think that's exactly what we do. But I'll let the listener decide. Number 3, if you want to include a story or a reference that you've heard, but you can't find it in a primary or academic source, name it as a hypothesis rather than a historical fact. Historians should be very comfortable admitting what they don't know or what can't be known. For instance, if you've heard that Caesarea Philippi was called the gates of Hades, you can say that you've heard someone say that explains a passage in Matthew, but you can't find watertight evidence that's the case. That's completely normal and a valid thing to say. This is the one point where I feel like, yes, I think I am too quick, maybe the whole team, I'll speak personally, I am too quick to say we know this versus we don't know this, but the evidence seems to suggest this. I agree. And this is one of the areas where I think the minimalist approach that Dr. Laura Robinson has is well warranted, and it stands on its own 2 feet, because what it does is it keeps you from ever making that mistake. If you can't prove it, then you never cross the line, right? And I think I've spoken a lot in this series about why I don't think that's where I want to live all the time, but it shows the validity, the value in the minimalist approach, because you never have to worry about this. I think you have to worry about other things. I think the minimalist approach has drawn all sorts of other connections based on philosophy, classical theology. I think actually we commit all the exact same critiques in the minimalist camp. We just do it for different reasons, philosophical reasons, theological reasons, but we bring all kinds of things from later in history. I think that's actually true quite a bit. So it's not that either approach. There's a value to both minimalist and maximalist approaches. There's also dangers to both approaches. But I do think that's well warranted and said. I think her example of Caesarea Philippi is a great example of what I'm talking about, though. She says there's no evidence to that. The archaeological team at Banyas in Israel disagrees with her. I don't mean that to be a patronizing. I just mean, now, scholars have to take all those dig reports, scholars have to take all those things and pull it together and say whether or not the dig team, the team who does a dig is not the scholastic authority. They do their job, and then the scholars on the other side do their job. So it's true that but to say there's no evidence is too far of a statement in the other direction. Now, Caesarea Philippi. Is it possible that we're over-narrating, to go back to whatever video that was, 2 or 3? It's possible. Because we're taking all these pieces of evidence from Caesarea Philippi, the dig at Banyas, and we're pulling them together in such a way, we may be over-narrating. That's a possibility. But to insinuate that there's no evidence, but this is why we'd like to think that, is a step too far in the other direction. So there's probably somewhere in the middle. But that critique is well stated, well received. I need to be more disciplined about making that distinction, for sure. And since I've been in grad work, I got into grad work after this blog post was public. That next semester is when I started my grad work. It's been helpful for me because I'm forced to live in that space. So anyway, that's just some thoughts that I have. All right, she closes by saying, I don't want to discourage lay interest in history. I don't want to scare anyone off of it, but I want it to be well done. I agree. I think there are some easy steps, these are some easy steps that could really improve the output of the show. I agree, and that last paragraph could be well said, and let's just leave it at that. I do believe that perhaps the issue isn't that we haven't taken these steps. It's that we have. Some of that was just missed. I don't put that. That's not on Dr. Robinson. She doesn't have to know everything about our show. She did some level of due diligence. I appreciate that. But I think it's less about the fact we haven't taken those steps and more about the fact that we have been taught by, might be a better term, and we're coming from a different perspective that she doesn't agree with, and that is also okay. We are on the same team. We are in a place where we both love history. She's probably, and I'm speaking again, I didn't get a chance to sit down with her. I really wanted to get a Zoom call or 2 or 10 together just to make sure I wasn't making assumptions, just to make sure I could talk through some of these things and make sure, I think assumptions can be a little foolhardy. So I didn't get a chance to make sure I'm right about this. I would assume she's probably a minimalist and I'm a maximalist. I would assume she's probably a marginal camp scholar, and I'm not a scholar, but if I was, the people that taught me are mainstream Jewish camp scholars. And that's more the issue, rather than it is citations, saying what I don't think we're saying, some of those things. I do love some of the stuff she's offered up. I do love her pointing out the small world problem. I do love her talking about the problem of over-narration. Those are well said. I do think that perhaps some of those same issues were made even in the way that this gets engaged with, right? So was 10 episodes enough for her to really truly see what we've done and understand the BEMA corpus, like our body of work and what we've given ourselves to? I don't know. One of the things that in the last video, if you clicked on the Lois Tverberg conversation in the comments, you saw that one of the things Lois said was you just didn't do nearly as much research on who I am and what I do, and you've misrepresented, and you've misrepresented, and you've misrepresented, and that's the danger. The danger is if we don't understand, or we don't have enough conversations, or we don't go back and forth enough, we do misrepresent each other, and I don't want to do that to Dr. Robinson. I don't believe she's wanted to do that to us, and so I love to. I also can appreciate a little bit of what she's doing with her Substack. She's got a snappy, engaging Substack. She loves to take popular things. Could be the BEMA Podcast, could be Lois Tverberg, could be The Chosen. And if you follow her Substack, she loves to take some snappy pop culture, like what's hot in Christianity and history, and critique it and throw shade where it's necessary and affirm it where it's necessary. That's part of what she does, and it's part of how she's built a little bit of her own platform. And I say that with a little bit of a wink and a little bit of a nod, as somebody who is I'm not a scholar, but I'm a content creator. And I think she is a scholar, and maybe we kind of have some overlap here. Maybe I'm this and I'm trying to play in her world, and maybe she's that and she's trying to play in our world, which is beautiful, to be honest. But I can't appreciate what she's doing and what she's trying to build, and the efficacy of how that works. So, yeah, I just really appreciated the fact that she was friendly, that she was as kind as she was, because she didn't have to be. And yeah, I just look forward to growing as a teacher. I look forward to talking to her more as the future continues to unfold. I hope we continue to keep talking, because the conversations that we had and the weeks and months that followed, I grew from. They were very, very helpful for me. She got me connected to other pieces of other resources, other scholars that are from a different camp than me, and it just was a well-rounded conversation. We talked about everything from Goulder and Session 3, and we had some great conversations. So I know I'm better because of those conversations. I'm better because of this conversation, and I hope for more. And I hope the same on some level may be true on her end. But I'll let her be the judge of that. But great conversation. I enjoyed doing this series. Hopefully it didn't seem too defensive, but hopefully it was helpful to think about, to engage, to critique, to look into. So there you go. There's the end of that. We'll see where we go next on our YouTube channel. But thanks for hanging with us through this series. Talk to you then.